Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to talk about food labels and how to read food labels. So probably an important skill to have. And in New Zealand I believe it's law that any food product that's sold at a supermarket and places like that, there are a few exceptions, if you go to a market and things like that, but otherwise I believe foods have to be labelled with some basic information, which includes some of what we're going to look at here. So guys, let's have a look. I've got two food labels here. Sorry if it's a little bit blurry. Wheat crackers and sweet biscuits. So in New Zealand, most food labels will have the amount of energy, fat, carbohydrate, protein, fiber, and the amount that's in each serving and the amount that's in 100 grams. They also have the ingredients listed, so products, if they're made from various ingredients, they have to list what ingredients are in there, and they have to list them in the order from what's most abundant, what the major ingredient, through to the least amount. So you can see here the ingredients is mainly wheat flour, and then vegetable oil, salt. So pepper is what's the least of in these crackers. And that's quite interesting. Often when I buy juice, for instance, if you see sometimes at the supermarket they've got things that are labelled fruit drink, so it's not labelled fruit juice. And the fruit drink, if you look on the back, the first ingredient is usually water, and the second one is sugar, and the third one is actually fruit or fruit juice. So a lot of those fruit drinks, it's actually mainly, it's not even mainly juice. Or often if you look at products, so if you're buying something like, I don't know, like cranberry sauce, the other day I was at the supermarket buying cranberry sauce and I looked on the back, and there were two brands and one was slightly cheaper than the other. But I thought one of them might be slightly better quality. Well, one thing I did is I flipped over the container and I had a look under ingredients. It had sort of, I think water and gelatin were some of the major ingredients, and then it had cranberries, and one of them had the cranberry sauce was 43% and the other one was 35%, and it was actually the cheaper one that was 43%, so went with the cheaper one. It's actually got more cranberries in it. So often, sometimes it pays to be able to look on the labels and look at what you're actually buying, what's actually in it, and sometimes you'll actually find you'll actually pay less money for something that's got more of the ingredient in it that you actually want. So it pays to have a look. Anyway, let's compare these two labels, the wheat cracker. So you've got, it'll always say what a serving size is. So the serving size here is 3 crackers, and then it's got the amount of energy, fat, all these things that you would have in 3 crackers. And then they also have how much is in 100 grams. So if we look at these, which one of these has more saturated fat? So you've got fat here, so this one's got 16 grams of fat, and 1 gram of that is saturated fat. That's in 100 grams. Alright, if we look over here, fat, we've got 13 grams, so slightly less. Oh, but actually almost over half of that is saturated fats. So the sweet biscuit, even though it's got less total fat, it's got more saturated fat. Saturated fats are a type of fat that are not so good for us. They've got more, often got cholesterol and things like that in it. So the sweet biscuits have more saturated fat in them. Now, why can't we compare the serving size? Why can't we use the fat here? Here, look, saturated 0.2, and here saturated 2.6. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be fair, because 2 biscuits might be a lot heavier and weigh a lot more. They might be a lot bigger in size than 3 crackers. So a serving doesn't really mean anything. A serving could be a small serving or a large serving. It's just what they feel like a regular person would eat at any given time. So the cracker company here thinking people would normally sit down, have 3 crackers, and then maybe put the box away, and next time have another 3. Or if it were a drink, a serving is usually like a glass, for instance. So you'd often have a glass, or you might have 2 servings, you might have 2 glasses, but a serving is kind of the portion you'd normally expect. But for something like crackers or biscuits, it's probably a little bit arbitrary, but random, not too important. So best to look at the 100 grams per 100 grams here. So which one's got more protein? Let's have a look at that. Well, over here, 13.7 grams in a 100 gram serving in 100 grams, and over here 8.8 in 100 grams. So this one's over 10% protein, and this one's under 10% protein. So our wheat crackers win out again with more protein. So let's have a look. If we have a look at all these things, if we add them up, in 100 grams we've got 16 grams of fat, 1 of that saturated, 40 grams of carbohydrates, 5.1 grams of sugars. So again, that's part of the carbohydrates. That's what this little line tells us. So 40.7 and 16. What are we at there? 56.7. Protein, 13.7. So what's that? 71.4. And then dietary fiber, 10.3 makes 81.7 or something like that. So why doesn't it add up to 100? If we add up all the ingredients here, it still doesn't add up to 100. What else is in there? Well, usually the one thing that they don't have to include is sometimes a component of what's in here is water. So if it doesn't add up to 100, whatever else is left it's generally just water. So same in the sweet biscuits. If we add all of this up, it may not quite add up to 100 grams, and that's because there might be a little bit of water in there too. However, normally if water is added, so here flour, sugar, butter, coconut flavor, if they add water as an actual ingredient, they have to list it. But in this case, water is not it's not listed as an ingredient, but I can see straight over here, coconut's going to have a little bit of water in it, or over here, the pepper or the garlic. Garlic will have a little bit of water in it. Often some of the ingredients themselves already have a little bit of water in it, since a lot of materials or a lot of ingredients, a lot of food things do have some water in them. So just remember here, fat, if you've got the little line here, saturated, this is 1 gram of the 16 that's saturated, or here sugars, 5.1 is 5.1 grams of the 40.7 of those carbohydrates or sugars. So what's the rest? Well, if you've got 5.1 grams of sugar, well, what other kind of carbohydrate might there be in wheat crackers? Well, let's have a look down here. Wheat flour, that's it. So carbohydrate, it's basically starch and sugar. So 5.1 grams of that is sugar. The rest of it would be starch. So, guys, pretty straightforward to read these. You've got the serving size, servings per package, and the amount of each thing per serve or per 100 grams. And the ingredients in the bottom listed in what's the most abundant, the biggest quantity ingredient through to the least. So if we go down, a couple of questions here, sort of exam or test type questions you might get. Which food contains more energy? So we'll have to pop back up. Which of these two contains more energy? Let's have a look. Which one contains more energy? Well, energy in 100 grams. Here we've got 1,533 kilojoules, and here 1,798 kilojoules. So 1,533 kilojoules, 1,798 kilojoules. We've obviously got more in the sweet biscuit. It's a bigger number. So over here we've got the value in calories too. Remember, like I said, that's just like when we measure distance, you can have feet or meters or miles and kilometers. Kilojoules and calories are just two different ways of measuring energy. But if we look at here, we've got 1533, 1798. Okay, this is obviously a bigger number, more energy in the sweet biscuit. Okay, what's our next question? Which food contains more sugar? Well, that's a good question. Let's have a look. Which one contains more sugar? So we come down to here, carbohydrates, and then sugars. So this one's got 5.1 grams of sugar. And this one here, the sweet biscuit, well, it's sweet, so it's what we'd expect, 36.1, a whole lot more sugar in there than the wheat cracker. Only a portion of the carbohydrates in each food are sugar. What other carbohydrate is present in each food? What other carbohydrate do you think it is? Well, dietary fiber is listed down the bottom here, so it's not fiber. Sugar's shown as part of this is sugar. What's the rest of it? Well, we said it just before. It's basically starch. So it's usually flour or potato or rice. That's gives it that starch. So in this case here, wheat is flour. Wheat flour is made from wheat, has a lot of starch in it. So carbohydrates, this value here is always a combination of the starch and sugar, and it might show them as separate. It might show sugars down here, for instance. Sometimes it would even separate both of them out. So it had sugars 5.1, and how much starch would be in there? Well, 40.7, take away 5.1, that would be 35.6. So sometimes it might actually even show sugars there, 5.1, and then it might say starch, 35.6. Cool, fantastic. Alright, how much fat is there in one sweet biscuit? So, let's have a look. A serving size here is 2 biscuits. So how much fat is there in 2 biscuits? Here we go. 4.6 grams in 2 biscuits. So how much would there be in one? Well, half of that. So it would be 2.3 grams in one sweet biscuit. 2.3 grams of fat in one sweet biscuit. Which food contains more salt? And this is something that's just something you should be aware of. Sodium is basically another term for salt. Salt, our regular, the normal salt that we would eat is normally is actually technically sodium chloride. But often what they do is they measure the amount of sodium in a food as a measure of how much sodium chloride is in there. So that's generally basically the sodium here tells us how much salt is in there. So 240 milligrams of sodium, of salt, and in our sweet biscuit 300 milligrams. So that's kind of quite surprising maybe. Even in 100 grams of our crackers and our biscuits, the sweet biscuits actually have more salt. And it's probably the sugar, it's probably all that sugar in there that masks that salty taste, and the salt probably is in there just to enhance the flavour. But who would have thought? Often you might be surprised when you look at some packages like this, that in this case actually the sweet biscuits actually have more salt in them than the wheat crackers. But guys, I find this really useful when I'm going to the supermarket. You might pick up 2 products. You may have even tried them both before, and they might taste the same to you. So if they taste the same, you could look at which one's got less fat, which one's got less energy in it. You might as well eat the healthier one. Or if you're buying a product and you're buying something, I don't know, like cranberry sauce, you could look at which one actually has more cranberries in it, per 100 grams. Or all those sorts of things. It's interesting to see what's actually in the food, or to compare 2 different brands of the same thing. All right? Or maybe you find one brand, tastes a whole lot better. Well, it'd be interesting to look at, flip over. Why does it taste so much better? Does it taste better because it's got a whole lot more fat or sugar or salt in it? Might be interesting to actually have a look. It's ice creams and things like that. It's sometimes interesting to have a look at them. You might find an ice cream that says low-fat ice cream. Well, flip it over and you might find actually that yes, it's low fat, but it's packed full of sugar. So some things might be low fat, and the people selling it might advertise it as low fat, so you think it's healthier, when actually it's just got a whole lot of sugar in there. So it pays sometimes to actually compare it. And so if you were looking at a low fat ice cream, it might pay to actually compare with a regular fat ice cream, whether the amount of energy is actually different, whether it actually has less energy in it. Because if you just pack a whole lot more sugar in it, the sugar is just a slightly different type of energy, and it might not actually be any better for you. So it's really interesting to actually have a look at what's in the products. I mean, the people selling them are out to sell you the product, and so they want to convince you it's healthy, it's tasty, it's all of those things. It's better than all the others, but sometimes, looking at the back of the packet, you might actually find, something quite interesting. So guys, I hope that was helpful. I think this is pretty straightforward. I think that last question that I had down here, one of these last questions, how much fat is there in one sweet biscuit? I think that was maybe just the little trick there. Just have a look at the serving size. We had 2 biscuits up here, so you'd have to halve whatever value you had here. So we could ask you questions like that in a test. I don't know how much you can really study for something like this. I think it's something you just need to be able to figure out. But I guess if you're familiar with it, you might be a bit more confident. So again, last thing just to be aware of here, fat, that's the total amount of fat, and the 7.5 here, the saturated, this little line tells us that of these 13 grams, 7.5 of them are saturated fats or carbohydrate here, 67.9 grams. Of those 67.9 grams, 36.1 grams are sugars. And if you weren't aware of that, if you went to add all this up, it'd be more than 100 grams, and that wouldn't be possible because this is per 100 grams. So just be aware, if there's a little line underneath like that, it's saying, carbohydrates, that's the total, and that's the component of it, that's sugar. Or fats, that's the total, that's the component of it. The saturated here is the component of it, that's saturated fats. Cool, again, hope that was helpful, and we'll get on to the next tutorial.